Alright, what's up, fellas? So, I am going to do a Monster Sanctuary tier list. Now, if anyone is like me and wonders, why is there no Monster Sanctuary tier list out there? It is because this game, which is mostly oriented around PvP, uh, all the monsters at max level are all good, right? And the game is less so about picking broken monsters like in Pokemon PvP, and more so about creating a team that functions well using the tools that the monsters provide. However, in my tier list, I will be doing it as a Bravery run on Master Difficulty tier list. So, not all the monsters are equal in that regard, because we are mostly concerned with the early game. Actually, most Master Bravery mode runs are not. You're never getting to 40 plus. Most of the runs will end like usually before 35. And sometimes, if you really have a team that requires the extra skill points, between 35 and 40. Um, so I'm going to do this. I'm not going to do all however many monsters right now. That would take forever. I'm going to do this series in 4 videos. One of them will be the supports. So I'll be doing all usually first slot support monsters. So like your shielders, sometimes buffers, sometimes healers, sometimes debuffers and combo initiators, maybe depending on the team. Probably not actually. Probably just shielders and healers, pure supports. And then the second one will be utilities with utility slots, which could function a lot of different ways. Basically, all the monsters that aren't pure supports and aren't pure carries, they're going to be in the utility slot. Like a good example of a monster that is a utility monster would be the snake. So he will obviously go into the utility slot. I can't even find him, so I guess I won't be able to show you. But if you guys know the snake, then that, in my opinion, is sort of, it's basically a utility monster. And then carries. The third one will be carries, which are just damage dealers. And that's it. But hang on a minute. Didn't you say 4? Yes, I did say 4. And the fourth one is going to be everybody's favorite monsters, the Spectral Familiars. These are unlike every other monster in a randomized Bravery mode run on Master Difficulty. You are always guaranteed one of these monsters. So we will be doing them as a separate video because 1, they're all fun, they're all great monsters, and 2, they look good. So we will start with, should we do it in order? Probably not. I'm gonna do it in order of sort of what I think are the most boring. And I kind of think the Toad functions as pretty boring. So where we're gonna classify the early game is levels 1 to 20. So these first 2 rows are what we're looking at for the early game, which is most of the game, I would say. Like, you're not getting to 20 until like the Golden Temple. And then at that point you're in the mid game, but you're doing the mountain area, the blue caves, the forest, the dungeon, and the ice. That's 5 areas you're doing in the early game, whereas in the mid game you're doing maybe the Golden Temple, half of the Golden Temple, the beach, and the magma caverns. So that's 3. And then the late game you're doing like the workshop and the tower, and that's it. So 20 to 30 we'll call the mid game. Still important because some runs do get challenging at that point. Very challenging depending on what your encounters are being randomized as. Like what your bosses are especially. And then the late game is 30 plus, which hardly matters in a bravery mode run. Yeah, like when monsters that are so scaled towards their late game row of abilities, usually those monsters do not perform well in bravery mode runs because you're not getting to 30 until, well, the game's gonna end. If you don't have a team that can get you to 30, you just won't get there on master difficulty. Which is also what we're going to be talking about. And the main difference between master difficulty and the lower difficulties is that in lower difficulties, multi-target moves are very good. But in master difficulty, multi-target moves are almost always useless. So we will definitely be accounting for that. So the Toad, how does he do in the early game, right? So he gets Protector, which is nice, Toxin, which is nice, Mana Proc, which is good, Extra Line, Cascade, good, Weakness, cool. So he almost kind of functions with the way his stats are spread. He's like bulky. He's very bulky, and you almost want him to function as a support, like click buffs, click heals. But he doesn't get any good active healing abilities. I think heal is not good. If this was restore, where it removed debuffs, I would consider always using this monster as a support. But because heal is almost always useless, or like it purely does healing, but usually if you're healing a monster that has a bunch of debuffs in it, you're losing the fight. You're losing, and you want to either forfeit or run away and restart that anyways. Restore is just better for keeping momentum up in a battle. So really, this monster functions as like a bulky carry, which isn't bad. In some cases, bulky carries are better. As far as typing goes, he's strong to water, which is a great resistance, but weak to fire is not good. So real quick, I'll talk about the typings in a playthrough. The most threatening types, in my opinion, are normal. Neutral is the most threatening type because it's usually just the strongest, and it's usually associated with bleed stacks, and bleed can just be so threatening. And then the next two are fire and water. Because of the debuffs associated with them, burn does a lot of damage, and congeal is incredibly threatening. It's rare, but it is so unplayable to play against a congeal team, almost to the point where you have to just skip the encounter. Like you can't fight against congeal monsters, especially since in master difficulty, you'll be like level 12. You'll take an encounter and you'll be fighting 3 monsters that have access to their 30 plus abilities, and it's broken. And they're just congealing you. They're clicking like level 3 Ice Storm on your whole team, and you don't get to play the game. So yeah, that is why fire and water are the second most threatening types, and then earth and wind are the least threatening types, in my opinion. because of the associated debuffs. Shock is not that big of a deal. Poison is just annoying. It's not usually that big of a deal. And if it does become a big deal, you can just reset. And like the damage is slow enough to the point where you can always predict if the poison stacking will be a problem before you can end the battle or win the battle or delete like 2 of the 3 monsters, right? So yeah. So having a good resistance but a bad weakness is whatever. I mean, it's all right. I would rather have a bad resistance and a good weakness, but it's all right. So let's see. This monster basically just doesn't do a whole lot. I mean, okay, so early game he gets like a little bit of passive healing with like poison glands, toxic feedback, and toxin. He gets taunt, which in my opinion is borderline unusable because it just gets them killed. They just get themselves killed when they use taunt on like especially wild encounters, because in master difficulty it's the wild encounters that are usually the most threatening and the bosses, and not so much the keeper battles. So he just tries to take like a fire move for his boy that is resist fire and gets deleted, and he's gone forever because we are also talking about permadeath for this. We're talking about Bravery, Master Difficulty, Permadeath, Randomized, and Relics of Chaos, I guess, which are, I mean, they're fun. They're fun to use. They're fun to play with. Some of them are really good. So in the mid game, his role doesn't really change much. He gets some cool auras. So extra channel is really good. His buff is really good. Like barrier and safe cat channel, I think is the best buff in the game because it's sort of difficult relying on buffs. But when you have a guaranteed channeler, it's pretty nice because you don't have to invest as much into mana, which is the most important stat as far as playing the game. Multi-bulk, which is cool, and then Tenacious Barrier, which is fantastic. So like, yeah, I mean, he just does pitiful damage and kind of stacks debuffs and stuff, but he provides sort of decent utility with his buffs and his multi-stacking buffs and his Tenacious Barrier, which is cool. And then in the late game, which, I mean, we're going to pick probably 5 abilities here, 5 or 6, because the game usually ends before, like, 37 usually. You're going to take your 3 attacking skills, mana stability for the extra defense, aging, because any monster that has aging should take aging, and then mystify, because it's a nice little way to give himself buffs. So, like, aging at 30 plus is bad. Like, the monsters that really utilize aging the best are the ones that get it early in the game, not 30 plus. So that is basically how this monster functions. Real quick, we'll look at his shifts. So we'll check out what so he's got heal charging as his light shift, which I think is pretty bad. Heal charging is a good ability, but it's only good on a monster that really uses healing skills. Now he does have toxic feedback, so he's getting passive healing, but that's only on himself. He's not affecting the entire party, and with his healing skill, if he were to be built that way, that gives a lot of charge stacks to one monster, but it doesn't remove debuffs, so it's just not really good enough in most cases where healing is required. You are usually healing monsters to also get rid of debuffs. So I usually, every time I get this monster as in the beginning on a randomized, as my random spectral, I take mana potential because, I mean, the damage is nice. Like, by the time you're in the end of the early game and throughout the mid game, you have a lot of mana, which is a lot of extra damage. And then you can stack mana recovery on this guy and just mana. So you're getting plus channel means you're having a lot of extra mana, so you're getting damage reduction as well. Damage reduction is not as good because of the way it scales. Damage reduction has diminishing returns the higher it gets. So like if you have, let's say, 200 mana, you're not actually getting 10% damage reduction. You're probably getting 5% or less, depending on what your defense is originally. And defense is pretty important, and you usually want to keep it high. Anyways, so, but the extra damage is nice, plus the shift just gives him more damage to begin with. Like, he goes from 4 to 7, whereas here he goes from 4 to 5. So, like, this is if you want to build him as a support, which I don't think he functions very well as a support style monster. I think he functions better as a bulky offensive monster. So that's that. So let's go ahead and put him in the tier list. I'm going to slap him probably... We'll put him in B tier, just because being bulky is nice. Like, having staying power is really good. That's about it, right? Alright, we'll do the Eagle next. The Eagle is a classic case of big hitter and goes last in the party. Actually, most of these monsters will most of the time go last, except maybe Toad and maybe Lion in some cases. But yeah, he does the most damage without a doubt out of any of the monsters. He's almost the best encounter, or the best spectral, for levels 1 to 10. Now, those levels don't ever hardly matter. And if they do matter, you're not that sad about losing the game pre-10 because you didn't get very far. The investment wasn't a whole lot. So we really don't care about 1 to 10. We care about 10 to 20 more than 1 to 10 as far as early game goes. So he is basically just a Thunderbolt, a Lightning Bolt spammer, and an Explosion spammer. Explosion is pretty good. The only problem is that once you get into the end of the early game, so like 15-ish plus, monsters start stacking buffs pretty easily. And so when you're going up against like Spell Shield, Dodge, it's just it's such a liability to have a monster that hits one time for big damage, but doesn't have the guaranteed hit chance, which the Eagle doesn't get until level 30. So I would say that for the early game, it's alright. It performs pretty well. It's just that in Master difficulty, some of the buffs that you have to deal with on monsters get so out of hand sometimes that it's pretty likely that this monster will not be connecting nearly enough. Plus, if they have agility plus passive evasion, because the thing you gotta remember is most of these monsters have access to their entire skill trees, even though you're level 15 and only have access to this one. So a lot of monsters are sitting on like base like 8 to 24% dodge chance sometimes. And then you stack an agility on that, that's like there's a 50% chance you're missing. And then in some cases you got to deal with blind. Blind is so threatening on this monster because it doesn't have a lot of hits. I mean, it has Featherstorm, but I don't really like using Featherstorm. So I mean, that alone, its buffs don't really matter, but also Revive is useless. I don't know why I have Revive skill here. Oh, because this is my first account save file, so this is why none of these skill points are correct. Like, you would never, obviously, Revive does nothing in in permadeath. So really, he wants to be an explosion spammer. It's just not guaranteed that he's gonna hit the explosion. But there are cases where the eagle can be weaved in as your last slot when you know you're going up against monsters that don't apply blind and don't have like excess amounts of evasion or have the dodging buff skill, but sometimes it's hard to predict that. But 20% is okay. Like, if you're going up against dodge of it, like dodge buff, or what is it called? Agility. 20% is basically the limit, where I would say, okay, that's fine. But anything like higher than that, he just misses everything. She just misses everything. So I'm not a huge fan of this monster, basically for the mid-game. Yeah, for the mid-game. And then obviously 30 plus for the late game, which doesn't really matter. Because it's for like 5 levels, but 30 plus, once it gets Sure Strike, it becomes very good. It gets Sure Strike, it gets extra attack procs, which are kind of nice. Multi-shock doesn't really matter as much. I mean, it can be cool. It can be alright. Featherstorm you probably won't take. You're only taking Featherstorm so that you can get first impact at level 30 because of how substantial it is. And then aging on this monster is almost borderline useless because aging doesn't really pay dividends in Bravery mode or on master difficulty until like you get to like 3 stacks. And you need to have other, like, this monster needs to be on a team where it has other means of getting to 3 stacks. Otherwise it's just gonna die. Like, this monster, if it gets triple targeted, it's dead. And then it also has Phoenix Affinity, which I'm not a huge fan of Phoenix Affinity in master difficulty, because usually when a monster gets dropped, it gets dropped from the base damage, and then it dies again to either debuffs or bleed. And that is a real feels bad moment. But Phoenix Affinity plus this thing is okay because you get extra healing. But it's also 2 skill slots that you have to spend, and skill slots are pretty useful on a master run. Like, you want to spend your skills, like I'm not ever taking like initial shock or like wind affinity, fire affinity. I'm not usually taking. I want to keep my attacking skills at the maximum, have enough mana to use them, and then only take passives that are like actually really substantial. Like Berserk. Berserk is fantastic. So that's basically how this monster performs. It's good in the early game, it's bad in the end of the early game and the mid game, and then it's fantastic in the end game. Which so basically, for the most important portion of a master difficulty Bravery mode run, this monster does poorly. So let's take a look at its shifts or switch. Where's the switch? Switch stone. So its light shift ability is charged up. Charged up is fantastic as a shifted ability, but it is terrible on this monster because this monster does not have a lot of hits unless you're just spamming Featherstorm, which I'm not a huge fan of. I'm not a huge fan of doing that. So I don't think it uses charged up very well. And if you do use charged up, then you basically have to have a supporting monster that can somehow stack uh, charge on other monsters. Like, for example, Leadership Targoat is a great way to just transfer stacks. But for the most part, this is so unreliable on a monster with its skill set that I take dual wield every time. Dual wield is terrible. Dual wield is an absolutely horrible ability, in my opinion. It's great when you're in PvP or when you have level 5 weapons because it gives you so much extra stats. But in a bravery mode run where you're sort of progressing with like weapons +1, +2, like you're rarely getting access to, unless you roll, like some cases some monsters will drop level 5 weapons depending on what your randomizer is. If you get lucky in that regard, then dual wield's great and you're glad you have it. But like, for the most part, I think dual wield is completely useless because you're basically spending your shift slot to get, like, from a level 1 weapon, you're getting like, what, 15 extra attack and magic, or you're getting 30 extra defense from a large shield, which is usually what I take. Well, usually I'll have a moon sword on for the extra 30-30. And then once I get like past the blue caves and monsters start doing more damage, then I put like a shield on. Because he's not one-shotting anything at that point, even with the moon sword. And the shield lets him not get one shot or two shot. Basically, you're just gambling on the fact that this monster never gets triple targeted or double targeted in some cases and just dies. So with all that being said, I think dual wield is the better one. I also think it looks better. I think the white eagle looked horrible. So unfortunately, I think the eagle is the least usable. It's the least bulky and it does the most damage, but sometimes on master difficulty, it's not actually about doing the most damage. It's about having the most longevity. So yeah, that's why the eagle is going to be C. And its typing is basically the exact same as the toad. It's strong to fire, weak to water, which is pretty irrelevant. I don't like it as much. As far as typings go, I much prefer the typings of the other two. The wolf is strong to wind, weak to earth. I think this is great. I think being weak to a less threatening typing is far better than being strong to a threatening typing. Again, resistances don't really matter so much. What matters a lot is weaknesses. And I think the wolf and the lion have the best weaknesses. Just the worst resistances, but we don't care about that. So as far as skill goes, this monster is fantastic. Mana Symbiosis is okay. So one of the first things you get is after you get like your level 2 skills and everything, like Spectral Flame, Claws, Air Sickle, whatever, you're getting Lifesteal, which is just good on its own. But Lifesteal is so fantastic with Mana Symbiosis because most of this monster's hits are doing 4 lines of damage, and then at level 10 they're doing 5 lines of damage. Nope, that one still does 4. So like most of them are doing 4 lines of damage, and then Claws does 3. But whatever. So you're getting anywhere from, and lifesteal works on each hit. So Mana Symbiosis is giving you 15 to 25 mana back, depending on what skill you used. That is substantial. At an early game, 15 to 25 mana is enough mana to not have to rely on putting mana in as much. Plus, he gets double impact, so if you're hitting a weakness, you get an extra damage line, which is an extra 5 mana back. Plus, you get Flash Freeze. Flash Freeze plus cooling means there's like a pretty good chance that every time you use a skill, you're going to apply an additional damage hit, which is 5 extra mana. So this monster doesn't have to worry about mana as much as the other 3 do. Now the Toad doesn't because he gets Channel. But this monster, like, outside of Channel, doesn't really need to worry about mana as much. And you can put more stats into bulk and crit because of that, which in itself makes this monster incredible. Like, when you have the ability to not worry about mana on a monster, it makes that monster a lot more valuable, because mana is the most important stat in the game. Well, in a Bravery run, just because you're always behind on levels, like, to the skills you're getting. So having the mana to be able to use the skills is really crucial, and use them again and again. Yeah, so that's the early game. And then the mid game. So this monster is the only Spectral Familiar that gets aging at 20, which is very good. Now, it's not the earliest monster in the game to get aging. Some monsters get it at, like, level 1 or 10. But out of the Spectral Familiars, it is definitely the best. Having early aging, access to aging earlier, is always better than having access to aging later, because usually level 30 plus, when you get there, it means your team is doing well and functions properly, to the point where adding aging onto one of your monsters usually doesn't matter, because you're almost always deleting one monster in one turn, or in 1 or 2 turns, and then the battle becomes a 3v2, and it's usually easy after that. And yeah, so yeah, I think it's incredible. It also gets another line with critical hybridization, and the shatters, I don't know, it's okay, it's worth getting, but I don't know. I mean, this monster's usually has crit chance that's so silly high that it doesn't really matter. Critical defense is cool, especially on a monster where the defense isn't super high, which means you're getting more value out of critical defense. You're probably getting like 7 to 6% damage reduction from this, depending on, like, assuming that your crit damage is 100% or more, which usually it is on a monster like this, because you're going to be having at least one item that gives crit damage, plus 15 here, so that is a good amount. By the time you're in the mid game, you've got like level 3 items-ish, depending on what drops you have, maybe 4 or 5. So yeah, critical defense is always worth. Multi-offense, fantastic. And then this monster is on master difficulty. This monster is a little weird because on master difficulty, it's almost purely a physical attacker. Because, like, you've got Ice Spears for water, that's physical. You've got Air Sickle for wind, that's physical. And then you've got Claws for neutral, which is physical. But when you play on normal or below difficulty, this monster almost always becomes pure magic because you want multi-target skills. So Ice Storm, magic, Gale, magic, and because you're taking Ice Storm, you're probably going to take Spectral Flame, which is magic. So yeah, it's a little weird. It is a mixed attacker, and I do, even though I say how bad multi-target skills are on Master difficulty, which they are, I sometimes take multi-target skills because sometimes they can be a nice little way to finish 3 monsters at once. Although usually if you have that situation presented, that means you're winning regardless of whether you had the multi-target or not. Multi-targets are never going to win you the battle unless you're applying debuffs. But they are sometimes a nice little way to finish the battle. Yeah, so what have we not? We have not talked about the shift stones yet. And also, for those of you wondering why my control is kind of bad, it's because I'm using a mouse right now. And whenever I used to play this game, I always played on controller. So I am a little bit slow as far as the controls go, just because I'm just not used to it, using a mouse for this game. So Equipment Master is fantastic. It basically just gives you an extra accessory slot, which you're never not gonna be happy. Like, you're never gonna be sad about that. Like, having extra whatever you want, bulk or a crit chance. Like, you could throw a cape on here for free, crit chance, crit damage, which ends up giving you a little bit of damage reduction because of critical defense. And the cape, I think at max level, or even at level 2, gives as much crit chance as what the Assault Shield gives you. But what the Assault Shield does, so as far as critical chance, depending on what accessory you're choosing for the other one, Assault Shield might not give you more crit chance, but what it does give you is it, in my opinion, gives you more bulk. This monster is going to be critting like crazy, like pretty much from the early game forwards. Like, you're going to have, in the early game, you're probably going to have like 30-something% crit on this. You'll have like the Spectral Flame, and then there's like a Spirit Blaze, which is one of the illegal items. Like, it's called the Relic of Chaos, which is pretty good, and it lets you stack buffs, or it lets you have a 10% chance of getting a free buff when landing a critical hit. So it works really well on this monster. But what Assault Shield does is it gives you a shield. And honestly, it just gives you more bulk than whatever one accessory can give you from Equipment Master. Unless you're like unless you're putting like a Vital Ring on or something, which is... I mean, I'm not putting a Vital Ring on this monster. I'm not even... Like, you could maybe go Coat, so you get health plus critical chance. But I still think that having a shield... Shields are a little weird, because it never tells you what the amount of the shield is. Like, how much extra HP is it giving you? I don't know. And it really never tells you. So, but it feels like the shield makes you bulkier. I am of the opinion that when you have a shielding monster as your support, you are always under way less threat. In fact, I would almost say that shielding monsters in this game are required because over healing monster, like if your pure support is a healing monster and not a shielding monster, and one of your monsters gets double or triple targeted, it's dead. What a shielding sometimes allows, not always, is for targets to survive being double or triple targeted, and then if that happens, then you just switch it out. or you risk keeping it in, which is never a good idea. So yeah, so shields are incredible. Now, the thing about Assault Shield is that in the late game, if you also have a shielding support, a lot of times you end up just overcapping in shield, so you're just getting no value out of Assault Shield. But I prefer to be safer than sorry. Whereas if you didn't have this and you were like, oh, I'm in the late game, I'm always overcapping on shield, I'm gonna switch to Equipment Mastery and take an extra damage item or an extra bulk item. And then suddenly you're getting triple targeted, your shield's gone, your support puts an extra shield on, but then you have no way of continuing to stack on top of the shield. And then if you get triple targeted again, you're dead. So yeah, I prefer Assault Shield in fact, on almost every monster that gets Assault Shield, I usually take Assault Shield. The only exception is Magma Pillar because, well, it's a support, so I don't care about Assault Shield on that thing. So, yeah, this monster is fantastic. And then in the late game it gets Primal Rage. Not that the late game matters, but it gets great auras, improved glory, improved sidekick. Both are fantastic. And Primal Rage, which is incredible. One of the best passives in the game, possibly, for battle, especially on master difficulties, because some of the battles do have a tendency to go long. And so when you're getting an extra 5% damage on top of every H stack for, you know, the last 10% of the run, that's cool. So yeah, I'm gonna throw, despite how much I was just hyping the wolf up, I'm gonna throw it an A tier, and you will see why in a second. So the wolf is fantastic. But and the wolf is my favorite, right? So I'm not biased here. I'm not being biased towards the lion. The wolf is by far my favorite spectral familiar. But I cannot argue that the lion is simply the best. And let's find out why. So early game, doesn't matter. But then once we get to 10, we get something called critical mass. So already you think, okay, so we're going to build this guy to be to be a critting machine, and he's just going to give himself buffs. And he's got heroic defense, which kind of helps. It makes him a little bit bulkier. His typing is great. I mean, I would in general, I would probably prefer to be weak to earth rather than wind. But it doesn't matter. Both of the elements are pretty irrelevant, so yeah, him and the wolf, like I said before, best typings. He's bulkier than the wolf. So he's a case of like doesn't do as much damage, but he's bulkier. So he has a little bit more staying power, which is very important in a bravery run, or in master difficulty. Sorry. And so then we're trying to look at, okay, so he has critical mass. So when he lands a critical hit, he gets 50% chance of getting a random buff. So what we want is critical chance, and we want lots of lines. So Fire Claws isn't that many lines, unfortunately. It's a good skill, good for doing damage. Sometimes you want it just because you have a monster will be weak to fire or weak to neutral. But really, the skill that he's spamming will probably either be Ignite until you decide to reswap into Firestorm, or Stone Rain, because it has the most lines. And having more lines means having more opportunities to get self buffs. And that right there, just in the early game, as a carry, like going last in your slot, that's fantastic. Plus, he has critical heat, which he's almost always going to be applying burn every time he attacks, because his crit chance in the early game will be similar to the wolf. It'll be like between 30 and 50, depending on how you want to build him. So you're pretty guaranteed to get 1 crit to apply burn, and then you're getting 10 mana back when they take burn damage. So, I mean, that's not substantial, and he doesn't have multi-burn. But it is added mana, and added mana is always nice. Any which way we can squeeze more damage into our accessories and less mana is important. And then this monster is another example of I usually reswap at some point to Firestorm. For not that I use it, but when an opportunity does arrive where I think, I wish I had a multi-target move right now, which doesn't happen often, but it's nice sometimes to have access to one. Which is why I do take Firestorm, because the tree doesn't have anything better. Like, Ignite is just not good enough. And then Stone Rain. Stone Rain is what you're using the most. It has the most lines out of any of his skills. So that's what he does in the early game, right? So he just buffs himself, and then he tries to sweep. In the mid game, 20 to 30, he gets Glorious Spark, which is a fantastic ability, a fantastic aura. Improved regeneration, doesn't really matter. Heroism, fantastic, and then Heroic Party, fantastic. So right there, by turn like 3 or 4, he's adding. You'll probably be sitting on minimum, like on average, probably 5 to 6 buffs, depending on what your crit chance is by level 20. And 5 to 6 buffs is giving you 10 to 12% damage here, plus an extra 5 to 6% damage here. So you're getting, on average, 15 to 17% damage, which is, that's great. That is fantastic. Plus you get the damage reduction, which doesn't really matter as much. But the reason why Spectral Lion is going to be in the S tier is because he gets, at 20 plus, critical boon, which means not only is he giving himself buffs just by doing damage, he is also giving his teammates buffs, his party members buffs, by attacking. And this stacks up pretty quick, especially with Glorious Spark, which gives him an extra line when he gets glory. It doesn't even matter. You could literally just spam Stone Rain for the lines, and you could, like, if something's weak to fire, you use Fire Claws, whatever. Neutral, you use Claws. Doesn't really matter. This monster performed. It is so simple, but its output is so good that it's a little difficult to, like, all you're doing is spamming attacks, and you're just buffing your entire party. So I don't even need to talk about 30. 30's whatever. Like, he gets multi-glory, which is cool. Or he gets multi-life, but whatever. And he also gets combo buffing, which just, it's like every time he adds a buff, he adds another buff, which is fantastic. Now, this is a late game, so we don't really care as much. Aging, we don't really care as much. Multi-burn, yeah. No, so none of his... So it's cool because all of his power budget is in his rows 10 to 20. Unlike Phoenix, or unlike the Eagle, and sort of unlike the Wolf-ish, sort of. And unlike the Toad. Who gets a lot of their power budget when they get to 30. The Lion, I mean, he gets Bleed, right? Bleed is really good. But he's still incredible from levels 10 to 30. So it should be no surprise that the Lion, because of his ability to be a functioning support while being a carry, is S tier. And that right there is the tier list for the spectral. Oh, I forgot to talk about his shifts, whatever, his dark and light shifts. So we'll check him out. So we'll start with the dark shift. It's whatever. I mean, as I just went on about how he just stacks buffs on every monster, getting an extra 1% crit chance on each monster is pretty cool. But the thing about this is it's pretty rare where you have all 3 monsters in a party who utilize crit chance, right? Usually one of your monsters is just a support, is not attacking, doesn't care about crit chance, and then your utility monster is either like spamming debuffs or healing or getting rid of debuffs or buffing, although in the case of the Lion you don't need a buffer. So very rarely attacking, and when they are attacking, they're built to do lines of damage rather than require crit chance just to get the combo up, so that when the Lion attacks, sure, he benefits from the crit chance, but honestly, in most cases, his crit chance, I've never had an issue with crit chance on this guy. I always go buff mastery because it just, you're stacking buffs, and because of his heroic passives, you're stacking more damage, right? So every additional buff that you're stacking is giving you an additional 2% damage, which is so insane. And then as far as the stats, they're not much different. They're really not much different. Like, sure, maybe the heroic assault gets slightly more stats, but it doesn't get more stats to the point of what one extra buff can do for each buff. So buff mastery is incredible. I take it every time. This monster performs so well out of all of the spectral familiars. I have basically just put them in order of how they perform consistently for me every time. So usually, yeah, the eagle gets to a point where he's a letdown because he's missing his attacks, and he either is dead because I made a mistake, or he just got deleted or triple targeted, or it gets to the point where we're 30 plus, he's got sure strike, but I'm not in a position anymore where he's required on my team because I found a better carry to use or something. The Toad's actually pretty okay. Like, he's bulky, he kind of passively heals, he passively sort of applies debuffs. Weakness is a fantastic debuff, but he's weak to fire, so it's a little threatening. Now, he's also bulky enough to take a hit that he's weak to, so whatever. But he also does the least amount of damage out of all of these monsters. Well, maybe not in the beginning. In the beginning, because of his extra stats that he gets from the dark shift, he actually does do more damage than the Lion. But once the Lion starts stacking buffs, he just does more damage than every single one of these monsters. And then the Wolf and the Lion are similar in the late game at least, but in the early to mid game, the Lion just basically does the same thing as the Wolf, he just does it better. He just doesn't have as much mana regen like the Wolf has. So take it as you will. The Lion, I think, performs the best in a run. So that's the tier list. If you guys want to throw down a comment about how you really don't agree and you think that the Eagle is S tier, yeah, go ahead, explain yourself. I will do the next videos the next episodes for this for support, utility, and carry, and hopefully I will be more concise per monster, because obviously those videos aren't going to have 4 monsters. And I will hopefully, now that I've sort of laid down most of the assumptions and everything, I will try not to repeat myself, like as far as everything that I repeated myself constantly during this video. So, yeah, that's it. Go well, and I will see you on the next episode. Peace, peace.